Many people are fearful about this second Trump administration, about what he might do. People fear the worst, really, that he will attempt to destroy what's left of the Constitution, that he will attempt to create some sort of a dictatorship, maybe a military dictatorship, that he'll never leave office, that he'll cancel future elections. And while I have shared those concerns, because I understand how horrible Donald Trump is, and I understand his deep psychological problems, which lead to a lot of what he does and wants to do, I have refrained thus far from engaging in that kind of speculation. I wanted to wait until he took office and see what he actually did. I didn't want to get ahead of the facts. Well, after 2 weeks, I think I've seen enough that I understand, I think, what they are intending to do. I don't know all the specifics about what they'll try to do on a day-to-day basis, but I think I understand the general contours of their plan. And I think that the actions taken thus far indicate that people's worst fears are what Trump and his people actually plan on doing. And in this video, I'm going to try to explain to the best of my ability where I think they're going and why I think that. I don't know how long this video will be. It'll take whatever it takes. It's probably going to be on the lengthy side. Please watch the whole thing. Even if you have to do it in several sittings, please watch this whole thing. So I normally don't write any kind of notes, but I want to make sure I get these things right. So in this video, I'm going to explain why I think, what leads me to believe that he will, in fact, attempt to create some sort of dictatorship. That he will attempt to functionally, if not literally, destroy what remains of the Constitution. And what's important to understand about this is that Trump is not in charge of all this. Trump really is just a figurehead. Trump is not smart enough to do this, because the plan that I see unfolding, as evil as it is being put together by smart people. Smart and horrible people. Donald Trump is not behind this plan. I mean, he may be fully on board with it. I don't even know if he knows all about it. I don't think he cares. I don't think, frankly, that he's smart enough to understand what they're trying to do. This is being orchestrated by people like, in my opinion, if I had to guess, people like Russ Vought, the guy behind Project 2025. And I think what they're planning is even worse than what they have in Project 2025. And so it's people like Russell Vought and others like him who are actually doing all this, planning all this, and really implementing it. I don't even think Trump is aware of a lot of what's going on. And like I said, he doesn't give a shit. But keep that in mind. This is not Trump. I've told you many, many times, Trump is a blithering idiot. He is about as stupid as a human being can be. And I stand by that. This is not Trump's plan. He's far too stupid to do this. He doesn't even understand the basics of how our country works. And the people who are creating this plan do understand how our country works. They see the weaknesses in the system and they're exploiting them. Now, if you're going to create a dictatorship in America, you have to destroy the other two branches of government, the Congress and the courts, or you must at least render them completely meaningless. And that's what they're going about doing. This is what we've seen the last 2 weeks. We've seen them trying to go around Congress. You know, they tried last week to stop the disbursement of funds to federal programs like Medicaid. completely illegal. That's called impoundment. He's not cutting the budget. He's just refusing to spend the money that's been appropriated by Congress. That's unconstitutional, and it violates a federal statute. We've also seen them firing people en masse, illegal firings, inspectors general, career lawyers inside the Department of Justice. We've seen them attempt to cancel programs and close departments of government. Just yesterday with the USAID department. These things are illegal. Only Congress can dissolve departments. Congress creates them, only Congress. It would take an act of Congress to get rid of these. He doesn't care. So we're seeing them trying to render Congress meaningless, going around Congress. I'll talk a little bit more about those things in a few minutes, but I want to get to what was really the straw that broke the camel's back for me, which is the thing that made me say, you know what, okay, all these things that I'm seeing, this is the final nail in the coffin. I know what their plan is now. This all makes sense. And that is this executive order last night, you've probably heard about it, creating a sovereign wealth fund. This is the final way that they get around Congress. They've already demonstrated that they can just ignore Congress. They can ignore laws passed by Congress. They can withhold funds. There'll be no pushback from Congress. There'll be no impeachment. They can close down entire departments that were created by Congress. But what remains, and what Trump really doesn't want, he doesn't want to have to go to Congress for money. And if he can create his own pot of money outside of Congress, then he has essentially done away with Congress completely. Congress will still exist, but he'll just ignore them, he'll go around them, and he doesn't even need them for money anymore. This sovereign wealth fund, to me, is a big freaking deal. So let's talk about that. Okay, so let's take a look at this executive order itself, because I like to read the exact language of these orders. I'm sick and tired of relying on the press to report on what's in the executive order, because oftentimes what they say is being done by executive order is not at all true if you actually read the executive order. So let's go to the executive order itself. Here it is. A plan for establishing a United States sovereign wealth fund. Executive order dated February 3rd, 2025. Now, I'm not going to read this whole thing, although it's short. But I'm not going to read the whole thing. I will put a link to this executive order in the video description below. So if you want to read this yourself, please do so. I'm just going to hit a couple points here. Let's begin with the beginning here. By the authority vested in me as President by the Constitution and the laws of the United States of America, and in order to promote the long-term financial health and international leadership of the United States, it is hereby ordered. Section 1, Policy and Purpose. It is the policy of the United States to maximize the stewardship of our national wealth for the sole benefit of American citizens. To this end, it is in the interest of the American people that the federal government establish a sovereign wealth fund to promote fiscal sustainability, lessen the burden of taxes on American families and small businesses, establish economic security for future generations, and promote United States economic and strategic leadership internationally. Well, doesn't that just sound great? Doesn't that just sound fine and dandy? Who could argue with that? It's for the sole benefit of the American citizens. That's all bullshit. The purpose of this whole thing is to create a pile of money, a second treasury, if you will, that is entirely under the control of the President of the United States, outside of the control of Congress. That's what this is about. This is about going completely around Congress and setting up his own budget, his own source of money, his own revenue that he can spend as he sees fit. This is the first step towards creating his own dictatorship. Because the number one power in our Constitution, the most important power of the Congress, is the power of the purse. The power to collect money and decide how that money is to be spent. Under our constitutional system, the president has no authority to spend a single penny unless it has been authorized by Congress. Setting up this wealth fund that will be under the direct control and sole control of the president means he can spend money without Congress appropriating anything. He can essentially run the government as he sees fit, pay for the things that he wants to do that are illegal. And he can do it outside of Congress, outside of any authorizing legislation, and outside of the need to get Congress to pay for it. That's what this is about. And notice here at the beginning, because this is completely unconstitutional, the president has no authority to set up anything like this. This has to be done through Congress. And take a look at this first part again. By the authority vested in me as president, by the Constitution and the laws of the United States of America. Donald Trump is saying that he is authorized to do this by the Constitution and the laws of the United States. Because keep in mind, a president has no authority under our system to do anything, to take any action, to spend any money, to do anything, unless it is authorized either by the Constitution itself or laws passed by Congress. So here Trump is saying, well, I have authority vested in me as as president by the Constitution and by the laws passed by Congress. But he doesn't cite a single section of the Constitution or a single statute that gives him any such authority. If the Constitution gives Trump authority to do this, then cite the section of the Constitution that gives you authority. He can't, because there is no section of the Constitution that gives him authority. If Congress has passed laws authorizing you to do this, then cite the statute. He doesn't, because there is no law authorizing this. And later in this executive order, he says this. In the end of Section 2, the plan shall also include an evaluation of the legal considerations for establishing and managing such a fund, including any need for legislation. Because he's giving lip service here to the idea, well, maybe it requires legislation through Congress. Here's the truth. Trump doesn't give a damn if Congress signs off on this or not. Because once this is in place, whether he creates it or Congress creates it, it's under his sole control. And so if Congress does it, he doesn't care. Once they do it, it's his. And even if they attempt to put strings on it, which this Congress wouldn't do, because Trump would say, I don't want any strings attached to this. No oversight. Congress, you have no role in terms of how I fund this, how I spend this, what I spend it on. You have no role. So don't you write this legislation giving yourself any role. And this Congress will go, okay, fine. So they will just authorize this, and then it will be Trump's to do with as he pleases. And even if they attach strings to give themselves oversight authority or to say, oh, well, we get to decide how it's funded. You think he's really going to pay attention to that? He's not going to give a damn. He'll just ignore that. But this Congress wouldn't do that anyway. The point is, he's happy to go through Congress, or he's perfectly happy doing it on his own. Because once it's in place, that's all that matters. How it gets to be put in place, he doesn't really give a shit. Once it's in place, he will have his own privately controlled, under his sole authority, his own treasury, his own pot of money with no oversight to spend on whatever he wants. Now, I didn't read all the rest of this because this is just flowery language, making it sound innocuous and, oh, it's to the benefit of the American people, and it's just some boilerplate nonsense. But again, I will put a link so please, feel free to read this yourself. But the important part of this is just the fact that he would be creating a budget, a second treasury, essentially, that is completely outside of Congress. This is how you are able to function without a Congress. This is how you essentially make Congress absolutely meaningless. You're dissolving Congress without actually dissolving Congress. This is a way of saying, okay, fine, you can still exist if you want, but I don't need you. I make my own laws by executive order, and now I have my own funding. Now I have my own pot of money that I can spend as I wish. So you guys can pretend you have a say. You can hold little meaningless votes that I'm going to ignore. I have everything I need now. I have executive orders, I have my pen, and I have this stash of money, and I can do whatever the hell I want. So there's other questions that remain. How does this get funded? And that is really dangerous. All this and more, we're going to continue this conversation. I want to get outside. So once Trump has set up this sovereign wealth fund, he doesn't need Congress anymore. He could just ignore their laws. He can essentially enact his own laws by executive order. Now, executive orders don't have the force of law, but if the courts are going to rubber stamp them, if Congress is not going to exercise their authority to impeach him and remove him from office, which is really all they can do, then he can essentially pass his own laws with the stroke of a pen. So he's got that. He'll ignore Congress when he wants to ignore Congress. And now he doesn't even need Congress for money, for things that he wants to do to help him implement his dictatorship or whatever the hell authoritarian regime they have planned. He doesn't need money from Congress to do those things. Sure, if he wants to continue funding any federal programs, let Congress do that. But illegal things, doesn't have to go through Congress anymore if he has his own pot of money. So that's the importance of the sovereign wealth funds. But how the hell will he get money into the sovereign wealth fund if he's going around Congress? And if Congress doesn't appropriate money to it, how does he get money in there? Oh, any number of ways. First of all, he can get his oligarch tech bros to put money into that sovereign wealth fund. Hey, you don't want my Department of Justice to put you out of business, do you? Better put some money into my sovereign wealth fund. He can have authoritarian regimes around the world put money into it. Who would benefit most from Donald Trump destroying the Constitution and imposing some sort of authoritarian post-constitutional dictatorship over here and destroying our alliances with our allies as Trump is doing? No one would benefit more from that than Vladimir Putin. And Vladimir Putin has a lot of money. He could put money in there. Think of all the authoritarians and despots who want this country destroyed. They can all put money into Donald Trump's sovereign wealth fund. And since it is outside of Congress, no one will know who's putting money in there. Nobody will see. Nobody will see how it's being spent either. And that's important. Another thing he could do is simply divert money from the United States Treasury and put it into his wealth fund. Does he give a shit if Congress doesn't approve? Nope. There's a big old pot of money in the U.S. Treasury. He could just move that money over. What, is Congress going to impeach him and remove him from office for it? No. So he can do that too. The point is, there are any number of ways. And let your mind run wild. I haven't given this much thought, but think about it. There's probably lots of other ways he could get money into this thing. So I don't think that'll be any problem at all. And so Trump will now have his own money that he can spend outside of Congress. So now he can write his own laws, doesn't need Congress. And he can appropriate himself whatever money he wants for whatever purpose. So he will have essentially rendered Congress completely meaningless. And as to the courts, first of all, he has so corrupted the Supreme Court that they're going to go along with most of what he wants. And even if they do rule against him on anything, he can just ignore them. And a lot of what Trump has been doing over the last 2 weeks has been setting all of that up. Because everything he has been doing, the impoundment of funds, refusing to spend money as appropriated by Congress, firing people illegally en masse, inspectors generals, prosecutors pardoning all these January 6th insurrectionists, even these ridiculous appointments of horrible people who are completely unqualified for these positions. Doing all of these things, they're all a test to see if Congress will do anything about any of it. It's all a test to see how far he can go and whether or not Congress will ever step up and oppose him on anything. It's all been a test. And now he knows that they won't. They will not do anything. In fact, it's even worse than that. They are going to happily cheerlead all of it, even as Donald Trump renders Congress meaningless, ignores Congress, defies Congress, overturns acts of Congress illegally. They will cheer it. They will applaud it. Take a look at this clip from Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana. Watch this.
To my friends who are upset, I would say with respect, call somebody who cares. They better get used to this. It's USAID today. It's going to be Department of Education tomorrow.
So here this United States senator is happy at the prospect of Donald Trump closing down the Department of Education and other departments of government completely unconstitutionally, completely illegally, and he's happy about it. He's going to cheerlead it. The Department of Education was created by Congress through an act of Congress. It can only legally be closed, be abolished by an act of Congress. This guy doesn't care. This is the President of the United States saying, I don't care what Congress has done. They can pass any law they want. If I want to overturn it on my own illegally, I'm just going to do it. And apparently, members of Congress who are supposed to stand up for their own branch of government and guard their own powers, they're going to cheerlead it. So, we're just 2 weeks in, and Donald Trump now sees that his path to dictatorship is easy, or seemingly so at this point. Congress can be ignored. He knows the courts can be ignored. And that's the other point I wanted to get back to. Because the only branch of government that could do anything to stop him is Congress. The only remedy left within the system, with our within the checks and balances of our constitutional system, is impeachment and removal by Congress. They're the only ones who can stop this. If Trump is hell-bent on doing these things, nobody can stop him except Congress. And even if the courts rule against him and strike down some of his actions, Trump can just ignore the courts. The courts have no ability to enforce their own rulings. So Trump can just ignore them. And J.D. Vance, his own vice president, just recently said as much, that if the courts strike down anything Trump does. Trump should pull an Andrew Jackson and say, the Chief Justice has made his decision, now let him enforce it. Meaning, F you courts, you can't do anything about it, so what, you made a ruling, I don't care, I'm going to do it anyway. You can't stop me. And all of these tests of Congress, all these things he's been doing to test the resolve of Congress, leading up to ignoring the courts is part of this test. Because again, only Congress can impeach him and remove him. And I think he's pretty confident that if the courts rule against him, he can just say, screw you, I'm going to ignore your rulings, because he knows Congress won't do anything about it. Now, I don't expect him to ignore every ruling, because a lot of the rulings he won't really give a shit about. But just wait until it's something big. Something big. And he ignores the Supreme Court. Not just some lower court, trial court or a circuit court. But wait until he ignores a Supreme Court ruling. And Congress does nothing about it. So he now knows, just 2 weeks in, that he will face no opposition. None. And really, it's not he who is doing it, who's testing Congress, who's coming up with the plans for testing Congress to see what they can get away with. This is part of the plan by Russ Vought, probably, and those others. Donald Trump, again, he's too stupid to come up with this kind of plan. He's too stupid to say, oh, well, how do we get around Congress? Oh, let's create our own pot of money and let's do these things to test the will of Congress, because we're building up to ignoring court rulings and all. He's not part of that strategy. Now, they might tell him and he might say, oh, yeah, that sounds great. But this is not his plan. He's far too stupid to come up with this plan. So once Trump has done these things, and has gotten to the point where he has rendered Congress functionally obsolete, completely meaningless, then he is free to do whatever he wants. Once he knows, and I think he now does know, that he can do whatever he wants, he can ignore the courts, he can ignore Congress, he can essentially write his own laws, and if the courts try to overturn an executive order and say it's illegal, he'll just ignore them. And now, with this sovereign wealth fund, once he has his own funding source outside of Congress, he no longer needs them for that. He can essentially he can do whatever he wants. Whatever he wants. And then you have dictatorship. You have, in a single person, the functions of the president and the functions of Congress, outside oversight of the courts. That's a dictatorship. That's what he will have. And with that money, by the way, what could he do with that money? Think of it. He could do anything he wants. Like maybe create his own personal army. I know that sounds insane, but what would stop him? He could create and fund his own personal secret police and military organization. And think of it. He has someone like Pete Hegseth at the Department of Defense. Now, who would be in his new military if he wanted to do that? Maybe some of these January 6th insurrectionists. They've already proven their loyalty. Maybe people like Stuart Rhodes would be generals in this new militia, Trump army. How about Mike Flynn? Haven't heard of him much lately. What's he been doing? He hasn't gotten an official job inside the administration, and he is one of Donald Trump's most fierce loyalists. Why hasn't he been used? Maybe he's been waiting to use Mike Flynn for something else. Mike Flynn, who was in fact a general, still collecting a pension, unbelievably. Man should be in prison. Anyways, a man with actual military experience, a general, maybe he would be perfect person to lead Trump's new private military. I don't know, just saying. And he's got the money to do it now, or he will, with the establishment of this sovereign wealth fund. He could purchase arms for it because Congress had, but we won't even know what he's doing with this money. Or he could just have his lackey, Pete Hegseth, Secretary of Defense, just transfer military weapons over to Trump's new army and Trump's new secret police, or whatever the hell he might create. That is something he can do now, because no one's going to stop him. And with the creation of this fund, he'll even have the money to pay for it. Now, what is Trump's job in all of this? Because I said he's too stupid to be running this show. He's not planning any of this. Trump's role in all of this is to keep everyone distracted. That's Trump's role. That's what the tariffs are about, among other things. Keep everyone distracted. So it's the tariffs one day. It'll be something else tomorrow. There's no limit to the number of things he can do to distract people. But the point is to distract everybody with the nonsense that Trump will be engaging in, while the Russ Voughts and the rest of them, Elon Musk, the people who are actually putting this plan into motion, creating whatever the hell it is they're creating, a Trump dictatorship or whatever the hell this is. Trump's job is to keep everyone distracted while they do that. That's his job. Now, as for these tariffs, him backing down on the tariffs, I think they understand that they need to do all of this now, as fast as possible. And that the only thing that can stop them, because the courts and Congress won't stop them, the only thing that can stop them from implementing this and establishing this Trump dictatorship is an uprising by the American people. I think that's, at this point, the only thing that can stop them. And they know that the American people are so stupid, so self-absorbed, so lazy, so ignorant, that as long as they are not really negatively affected personally, that Trump and his guys can get away with anything, literally anything. They won't care. They won't even pay attention. But if Trump went through with those tariffs and prices skyrocket, then you might have the makings of an uprising. People will be unhappy. People will be angry. People won't be able to feed themselves. If you cut all these programs all at once and you raise inflation and all of this, you might have the makings of an uprising. And they don't want that, not now. Not until their dictatorship, their authoritarian regime is more fully put in place. So Trump needed to back down because they couldn't afford the economic damage right now, because they couldn't afford an uprising right now. And so anyways, that's tariffs and other things. That's Trump's job. Keep everyone distracted while they implement the dictatorship behind the scenes. Now let's get to this idea of canceling future elections. Will that happen? You know, we have midterm elections coming up in next year. Will they try to cancel those elections? I don't put anything past them, but I don't think so. Because he doesn't care about Congress. No need to cancel elections that you don't care about anyway. Right? Because if we functionally have gotten rid of Congress, we can ignore Congress. We don't need Congress for money. We can ignore them at will. What do you care if they elect other people that you're just going to ignore? Now, the only caveat to that is impeachment. Because if they have not fully implemented their dictatorship, or whatever the hell this is, by the time the midterm elections come around, then it is still theoretically possible for a new Congress to come in and impeach and remove him from office. And if his dictatorship is not fully established or far enough along in the process, then the impeachment and removal process could successfully get rid of Trump. And honestly, at this point, I think that is our only real political solution, is to win the midterm elections by such numbers that we can impeach and remove Donald Trump from office. Saving that, I don't think we defeat this except through some sort of uprising. Violent, maybe. Civil war, maybe. I don't know. But I think that winning in the midterms and impeaching, removing Trump is the only political solution we may have left. And so perhaps they would seek to try to cancel elections somehow. Now, how would that happen? Because Trump has no power to do that. You'd have to get the states to cancel the elections. Anyway, I don't want to get off on that. I'll do another video on that later. I just want to stick with this theme. So let's assume the 2026 midterms happen. What they really can't afford is for a Democrat to win the White House in 2028. That is what they must prevent at all cost. Because remember, if they are successful in what they're trying to do, they will have implemented some sort of Trump dictatorship. They will have concentrated power in the presidency. And if they allow the possibility of a Democrat to win the White House in 2028, then that person would slide into that power. All of that power that they had created for Trump will now be in the hands of a Democrat. And they can't afford that. So they will need to ensure that either Trump stays in office or that a MAGA successor succeeds Donald Trump in office. So the question then will be, will he try to remain in office illegally? Will they try to cancel elections? All of that is possible. I don't say anything is impossible anymore. But what I think is more likely is that they will simply rig the election. That is the easiest way. You don't have to rig the entire country. As you know, since we have the Electoral College and each state chooses its own electors, all you have to do is rig a handful of states. Because you have all these red states that are going to vote for Donald Trump no matter what. All you have to do is rig a handful of swing states. That's it. That's all you have to do to ensure that he wins. And there's any number of ways that they can do that now. But one thing is for sure, if this is indeed their plan, and it certainly looks like it is, they must ensure that either Trump remains in office illegally or that they guarantee a MAGA successor. And they will not leave that to chance. They will do something to ensure that that happens. And so what can we do to combat all this? Because I'm going to be talking about all of this stuff going forward. And one of the things we need to be talking about is what can we do? Well, one thing, the most important thing we can do is try to win this on the political battlefield. As I said, our best political option, and it's probably our only political option before we have to resort to some sort of uprising. And that's happened in other countries. Dictators come to power and there is popular, oftentimes violent uprisings rising against the dictator. That may be what we are forced to do in this country. The only thing that may stop that is if we are successful in so turning the American people against Donald Trump and this fascist takeover that we win a huge victory in the midterm elections and impeach and remove him from office. And I believe that Democrats need to run on that specifically. They need to run on impeachment. We need to oppose Donald Trump politically over these next 2 years, drive his poll numbers so down, turn the American people so far against him and this fascist regime that we win such a big victory next year that we can impeach and remove him from office. And yeah, I know J.D. Vance would then take over, but I don't think J.D. Vance would be able to do what they can do with Donald Trump. But again, you know what? I don't want to get too far afield. That could be a discussion for another video. But that's what we need to focus on. We need to focus on convincing as many people as possible in this country to wake the hell up. And yes, I understand you will never get the cult to wake up. But we don't need the cult. All right? The cult is a minority. The cult is maybe a third of the country. Maybe. All right? If we can wake up enough of the rest of the people, it is possible that we win big enough in the midterm elections that we can impeach and remove this guy from office. That's what we need to do. We also need to embolden our state governors. We need some real leadership in the states to exert their authority in our federal system to stand up to this fascist authoritarian federal government and say, no, we're not going along with this crap. Because really right now, governors are the only, the states opposing this is the only political power within the system that we have right now. Anyway, I can go on, but this is already too long. And I will have much more to say about all of this stuff as I continue to think these things through, as things continue to happen. I hope to God I'm wrong about all of this. I hope I'm misreading this, but I don't think so. As I said, I was very reluctant to even make a video like this to begin with. I didn't want to go here. But given what's happening and the speed with which it is happening, and then now trying to create essentially their own treasury to fund this fascist dictatorship outside of Congress without any congressional oversight. That is the final way you wipe away Congress. Once we wipe away Congress, functionally wipe away Congress, and he has his own source of money, and we can ignore the courts and ignore the Congress. Wow. Anyway, much more to say about this. Thank you so much for watching this all the way through. I appreciate it. I'll have much more to say. Until then, be well, and I'll talk to you again soon.